What's up, YouTube? It's your boy, Mystery Lane, back with another processing IDE lesson. IDE, that stands for what now? Say it with me, Integrated Development Environments. And here we're going to talk about variables today. I'm going to run through a pretty similar lesson, actually probably the exact same lesson I ran through in class today and yesterday for most of you. But I figured this would be another good review to talk about using variables before our quiz tomorrow. So hopefully you get a chance to watch this tonight, and I'll try to make this quick so we can get to it and you can get to your other homework and go about having your happy little life. All right, so here I got a little program. I'm drawing a little ellipse with the center at 250, 250, and a size of 50 pixels wide by 50 pixels high. I've got a screen size up here in the setup of 500 by 500. So when I run the program, I get my little circle here in the window. Okay, so here's the kinds of things we talked about: drawing ellipses and scaling things, and hopefully you can hear me over the air conditioner in the background there. Okay, so here we go. Let's close that window. First thing we talked about was using, instead of these concrete numbers, we are using the size of our screen to scale our drawing. So instead of locating things at the center, I need to think about how this, I've got it located at the center now, but I need to think about how this center relates mathematically to the size dimension of the screen. So obviously 250 is half of 500, right? 250 divided by 500, that's 1/2, 0.5. So all I really need to do here to make sure that this is always the same size or in the same position, the center of the screen, I just need to make sure for the x dimension I do the width divided by 2. And I can do the same thing for the height divided by 2. Now remember, height and width, those are system variables. We don't have to do anything to use them. They're already variables that are already there waiting for us to use. When I type the word width, the computer program, the IDE, goes and looks at the screen size width value that it's got stored somewhere hidden that we can't see in its memory, and it says, okay, that's 500, and then if I change this number up here to 600, now when I run the program it says, okay, width is 600, and it just divides it by 2. So now it doesn't matter what screen size I use. I can make it wider now. I can do 800 by 500. I can run it, and boom, still in the center of the screen. So that works out great. Okay. You can do any fraction here. If I wanted this to always be located in the top right or the top left corner, I could do width divided by 4 and height divided by 4. And then when I run that program, it divides the width and the height by 4, and it places it there. Right? And you can move it all around the screen all you want to by doing those kinds of fractions that are a reference to the size values of your display. All right. Now we want to talk about, let's see, instead of having it in a static location, let's actually control the movement. Let's use two other system variables that we learned. That was mouseX and mouseY. So I'm going to do mouseX, mouseY, okay? And now when I run the program, a couple things you'll notice. I can control where the circle is, and it's leaving a trail everywhere that it goes. Right? So that's kind of an important thing to understand here. I'm not moving a circle. I'm drawing a new circle everywhere it goes. And if I leave it here, you can't really tell from looking at this view, but it's actually drawing a circle, probably 30 circles every second as I just kind of sit here with my mouse motionless. All right? And if you don't believe me, we're going to do some stuff to actually prove that that's true. Okay? All right, so first thing we're going to do is, I don't like having that boring background color of gray, so I'm going to change the background. Okay, so I'm going to go background 0, 0, and 255, and I'm going to make that the background color. And I'm a big Subaru fan, and the Subaru Rally colors are blue and yellow, so I'm going to make the fill color of the ellipse. I'm going to make that yellow, and that was, let's see, that was 255 for red, 255 for green, and 0 for blue. So that's going to make a yellow circle there. So now when I run my program, should have a blue background, yellow circle, otherwise doing the exact same thing. Oh, wait, what's going on? What happened to my trail of circles? And from that, we need to make sure we understand how this function void draw is working, right? How the draw function is working. It's actually a loop, and it's happening over and over again. When I use the background command, it doesn't just change the background. It actually kind of wipes the entire screen with that solid color. So everything that I had previously drawn disappears, and all I ever see is the most recent circle that's been drawn. Okay, so that's a big point to understand here. If I want to be able to see the trail of circles, I need to move my background command up here to void setup because setup only happens once. So when I run my program now, I get my trail of yellow circles again. There we go. Isn't that nice? Look at that. Yellow circles everywhere. There we go. All right. Now, what if I want the color to change? Right? What if I want to go from yellow and I want to gradually change it to red? That means I need a variable for the amount of green. Okay, so I'm going to make a variable here. Instead of just giving it a number, I'm going to put the letter G. We're going to make this actually, we're going to call it green value. Okay, we're going to give it a big name to show that it doesn't have to be a single letter. Okay. The problem is that processing points out to me right away is that green value doesn't exist. If you want to use a variable that's not an existing system variable, like mouseX or mouseY or height or width, and there's other ones too, but if you're making your own variable, then you need to declare it. So up here before void setup, to make sure that it's used by the whole program here, up here at the very top of the program, I want to declare my new variable. Okay, so to declare it, we first have to identify the type, and the type of numbers that I want to send to this fill function are always going to be an integer, a whole number. So I want the type int because that's the type of container that can hold integers, and I'm going to call it green value. And in keeping with good programming practice here, I'm going to make value capitalized up here. Okay, so now I have declared my variable. Okay, that's the first step. I can also initialize the variable, right? I could do that on a separate line. I could come down here and say green value gets 255. Or I can do it all at once. So I have right here, I have what we would call declaring the variable. Down here, we would call this initializing the variable, giving it a first kind of initial value. Okay, initializing variable. Or I could just go ahead and do that all at once. So I can delete all that and I can say int green value equals 255, and that is going to, that declares variable and initializes it. Now you'll notice I use those special symbols right there. When you use two slashes like that, that's a comment. The computer ignores comments because the comments are for us to read as programmers. They don't actually do anything in the program, okay? An important thing to know. There's another way to write comments too that we'll go over here in the next few days, but just wanted to put that up there. All right, so I've got my variable now, green value, okay? I've got my fill, 255, so I'm always gonna have some color red in there. And my green value right now is 255. I run the program, and it's really not any different than what I did before. Okay, but I'm kind of setting this up to be able to do the next thing. Okay, now, after I go through this void draw one time, right, I'm going to step through it line by line. I'm going to be on this line, which sets the fill color. I'm going to draw the ellipse. Then when I get here, I end up looping back to the beginning of draw. And I do it again. And I keep going through it. And the computer just forever, as long as this window is open, it's just going to loop back and forth. It's going to go start here, go read all those lines in that order, do everything in that order. Which, on a side note, that's why if you put background last, right, and let's actually do that really quickly. Control X, Control V. If I put background last, I never see the circle because it's wiping over the circle before I get a chance to see it. All right, so let's put that back. Let's undo. Okay, there we go. So now, after one time through this loop, I've got a yellow circle. I want to slowly decrease the value of green, right? I'm going to decrease my green value. So I'm going to say green value gets. I read that single equal sign as the word gets to let me know. Oops, got to make sure I capitalized. I didn't capitalize it, so I wasn't recognizing it. Error on variable declarators. I think it's fine now. I've got it spelled correctly. There we go. Green value gets green value -1. Okay. So now what happens is I run through this once. It starts green value at 255. I draw my first circle, and now I decrease the value of green value by 1. So when I come back up here again, now this time green value is 254. And the next time through, it'll be 253, and then 252, and then 251. And it'll keep going like that all the way down to 0 until I have just a red circle. And here we go. It's fading from yellow to orange all the way now to red. and here it is as a red circle on the screen. Okay. Now the problem is it stays red. Once I go below 0 and start getting negative numbers, the program looks like it's just interpreting that as a 0 the whole time and is never changing colors after that. So one of the things we learned how to do, which we can really stop here first, because if you're just trying to study for the quiz, that's all we really need to worry about. We need to know that we can use system variables. We can do math with variables, right? I can say use width divided by 2, and it doesn't change width. Right? It keeps width the same value. It's just in this instance, I'm using only half of width. Right? I can do any kind of math operation I want on a variable and use it for parameters, use it somewhere in the program. Here on this line, this is the line that changes a value of a variable. So I start with one certain value, and now I'm altering that value and storing it again. So I'm saying green value gets whatever green value used to be, but this time I want it to be one less. So it goes from 255 to 254. The next time it's going to be 254 minus 1, which is 253. So you kind of have to think of it as it does the math on the right side of the equal sign first, and then it assigns that value to the variable that you created. Okay? So that's an important thing to understand about working with these variables. Right? If you can declare a variable, if you can assign a value to a variable, then you're in pretty good shape. The other thing that you got to remember from the study guide was knowing which types of variables can hold what kinds of information. Because I can have things like a float, where I would type float and do something like wheel size. If I was making a robot program that had the size of wheels and it had some decimals in its measurement, right? I could make a float. There's strings and chars, which we'll get into. Remember, string is just a combination of letters and symbols. Usually we're thinking of words, but it can be any kind of symbols, like when you store a password as a variable and they want you to use a good mixture of symbols and numbers and letters, that's a string, as opposed to a char, which is a single character. It's only one letter at a time. Okay? And of course, the last type of value we have is the Boolean value, a Boolean type, which can only be either true or false. So make sure you know your types of variables for tomorrow. Okay, that should be it. If you're wanting to just review variable types or the variable information and what you need to know about variables for the quiz, that's pretty much it. Right? The rest of the stuff we're going to cover is the pretty easy stuff about RGB values, resolution numbers, etc., all on the study guide, all on Google Drive. Okay. What I'm going to do now is that last little step that I did in class where I reset the green value to 255 after I get down to 0. So at the beginning of this draw function, before I draw the circle, before I change the fill color, I'm going to do what's called an if statement. Okay? If statement is a control structure, so it needs this opening and closing curly brace. Notice I indented, and now after this opening curly brace, I'm going to indent again. Right? I don't want to line it up with this on the same tab as the curly brace itself. So if, and I'll type it in English here, if the green value is lower than 0, right? We'll do English first and then we'll translate it into code. Then what we want to do is make green value 255 again. We want it to go back. So if my condition is true, if it's true that green value is lower than 0, then I want to reset the green value to 255. Okay. And then if it's false, right? If green value is bigger than 0, or it is 0, then I want to ignore this line here. It's going to completely skip this over and go right down here to the fill command and keep going. So how do I translate this into a mathematical statement? And that's pretty easy. Green value less than 0. There we go. There's my condition. The computer's going to look at that and say true or false. If it's true, do this. Right? And how do we do this? How do we make the green value 255? We just simply say green value gets 255. Okay? And there we go. Now you can make a really complicated set of if statements like this to try to oscillate the color back and forth, like a smooth transition. But we're going to stick with this really simple one for now. And plus, I think most of you don't know enough trigonometry to be able to use sine functions and cosine functions to change our color values. But here you can see, oh, whoops, I forgot to Why is it doing that? Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. But now I'm going back and forth from yellow to red, and now I go skip right back to yellow, go red, 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 yellow, then gradually fade back to red. The color's changing. Now it's not letting me move it left or right, right? And I want you to look at my code really quick and see if you can tell me why that is. I'll count to 5, or you can pause it. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so when you go back over here, remember I got rid of that mouseX command. I made it so it's always in the middle of the screen, but the Y coordinate is controlled by the mouse. So the mouse can control the up and down, but the mouse can't do anything with the left and right. So I got to go back to mouseX there. Okay. All right, that's it. That's a pretty short video. I think I kind of dragged it out a little bit longer than I needed to, but I'm going to go ahead and cut this one off here because that's all we really need to know about variables for the quiz tomorrow. How to declare them, how to initialize them, and the kinds of things that we can do math-wise with them in our program. We can either work with them and not change the value, like we can do width divided by 2, or width divided by 4, or width divided by 10, or we can do width times, width times 0.4, or 0.4, or width times 0.5. Whatever kind of math you can think of, you can do it in this language. And if we want to change the value of a variable, we have to use what we call the assignment operator. That's the single equal sign, in order to tell the computer what the new value should be. When doing that, we can often reference what it used to be and then perform a little bit of math on that. And you're going to see this idea a lot in computer programming. There's a very common thing that you do in computer programming with something called loops, where you increment the value of a variable by 1 to help control how many times you do the loop. And we'll see that eventually as we get deeper into our unit. All right, everybody, have a good night. Good luck studying, and good luck with the other homework. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Smash that like button. Free giveaway if we get to 1,000 likes. Leave a comment below to be entered in the giveaway. I'll give away like candy in class or something. See you later.